What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning into the Allen Report this evening, morning, afternoon. This is a global transmission, so I salute you all who stand up in the face of tyranny. If you guys are wondering what happened to my last two YouTube videos, the YouTube gods took them down. Nothing I can do. Secondly, it's been a while since we've done a strategic relocation guide. And so today's video is going to be about war, invasion, and terrorism. Now, as many of you already know, what's happening in modern times in this world is beyond imaginable. And I'm hoping that this information I'm going to provide to you is either going to save lives or just help you in general. Now, the information I'm about to bring you is the third edition of a 4-edition series. This is probably one of the main books, if not the only book out there really, that is specific enough and detailed enough to really help and give you a better understanding. And as any wise person knows, you want to go back as far as you can in history and start from there and work your way up to modern times. Now, I'm not going to go all the way back to, the 1900s or the 1800s or, the 1600s, the 1700s, or even, the 2000s. The information I'm going to bring you is roughly between 2010 and 2016. And so you'll have a better understanding once I get the 4th edition, why we're going over the 3rd edition first. It's good to know the history before we get to the modern times. And I know you guys know that, but that's just for new listeners and viewers. Now, this information I'm going to bring you is not my personal opinion or belief. This is just what the experts have to say on the matter. So before we get into all the juicy stuff, I would just like to do a few shout outs. Shout out to my boy, Auditing America, great guy. Last I heard, he was helping the hurricane victims down south, so I salute you, brother. Keep up the good work. Shout outs to the Rundown Live, Kriston T. Harris. Great guy, super. I can't even words can't even fathom how respectful and courteous and kind this guy is. He was just in New York doing a 9/11 20-year anniversary video where he covers the truth about it. I highly recommend checking that video out. And thirdly, shout outs to Amazing Audits. He recently just got ran over by the police. He has a broken back or fractured back and a fractured neck. He's in real bad condition, guys. And on top of that, he's homeless. So if you could reach out to him or pray for him, and also if you want to get a hold of him, just say something nice. I would do that, because being nice goes a very long way, and we all could use support in our lives, no matter who you are, and so yeah, Amazing Audits, Auditing America, and Kriston T. Harris from the Rundown Live. Check them out. They're great people. I'm very honored and humble to even come across great individuals like that in my lifetime. So they are modern day George Washingtons and Paul Revere's, and I salute anyone who faces tyranny. Now, let's get into the juicy stuff, shall we? Chapter 10, War, Evasion, and Terrorism, Strategic Relocation. Now, guys, I'm going to do my best to there's a lot of reading here, but I'm going to do my best to skip and skim through this and give you only key information. So I will be going over all the paragraphs, so if you want to go back and read it yourself, you can. But here we go. The threats in this chapter may be difficult and unpleasant to consider and analyze for many readers, but we believe many of them to be most important considerations for your ultimate security. As we laid out in the background to these threats in Section 1, we described our analysis of the global terrorist threats and why we concluded that most terrorist Events are manipulated to create conflict and justify intervention and the restriction of liberties. We explained why we expect a third world war where Russia and China attack America with nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. Now, that sounds really familiar with... Now, this is 2010 to 2016 information. Here in 2021, that sounds really, accurate. So, let's move on. The IMF funds weapon deals... Oh, hold on, actually, let's start over here. We believe all these events are part of a greater plan. A plan of crisis and war that will manipulate people into accepting a consolidation of world power. In its basic terms, this is how we see this plan. 1. A terrorist threat is created and manipulated by Western leaders to justify military intervention into other nations. 2. This continual intervention and meddling around the world creates hatred against the U.S. and eventually justifies the long-planned nuclear attack on the West by Russia and China. 3. Anglo-American globalist leaders will emerge from their bunkers having had foreknowledge of the war and convince Western nations to yield essential sovereignty in favor of militarized global government. With conscription and taxation power significant to prosecute the war. 3. This new world government will eventually beat the Russians and use the residual threat of Chinese hegemony as an excuse to retain this world army and supranational authority. There will be the usual persecution and descendants and critics conversant with a systemic loss of individual and national rights. Here we examine these significant threats in more detail as they affect the U.S. and Canada. All right, let's go in. Terrorism in America. We see the war on terror as an essential part of this plan for world power. It is the favorite conflict creation vehicle that leaders throughout history have used to justify radical changes, expand military power, and reduce civil liberties while ostensibly working to combat this shadowy threat. The idea that terrorists hate the U.S. for its freedoms is just plain propaganda. There is hatred toward the U.S., but it is a result of CIA and State Department manipulation of other countries' leaders that create bad feelings. If that weren't enough, there's military intervention and occupation, blackmail, political arm twisting, financial incremencies with IMF funds, weapon deals, and the creation, oh my goodness here, of destabilizing opposition groups. In almost all cases, this manipulation favors the wrong side of the conflict. It consistently undermines democracy and works to put socialist and communist dictators into power. This manipulation goes back decades and is the real cause of deeply seated tensions and distrust even among our allies. This manipulation and creation of conflict is often referred to as Hegelian dialectic. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Create wars and attacks to justify a diminution of civil rights and constitutional protections. For instance, as we write this, Americans are being subject to significant new search procedures at airports that are unjustifiably intrusive. The shoe bomber and underwear bomber are not real terrorists. No trained terrorist would have been ignorant of the fact that you can't set off plastic explosive with a match. You need blasting caps. We think these two pasties were set up to set up just to give the government the excuse to control travel. Evidence of government-sponsored terror. There are many examples in history of governments fomenting attacks against their own people and then blaming another group to justify greater wars or crackdowns. Here are some examples. The arson attack on Maastricht in 1933 was blamed on Dutch bricklayer who was portrayed as a communist, creating a favor that was solidified the Nazi Party and allowed a bill that resigned critical civil liberties in Germany. Historians agree that this event was pivotal for the Nazi Party and Hitler's rise to dictatorship. The attack on Globalist Germany radio station in 1939 was one of the several attacks against German nationals living in Poland that Germany used to justify their invasion into that country and formally began World War II. Details from the Nuremberg trials revealed that it was Gestapo agents dressed up as Polish soldiers who attacked their own countrymen in a false flag operation called Operation Hilmer. The second highest man in IRA security force, I'm assuming his name's Kevin McGurry, was a British agent, unlike a typical spy. However, he worked actively to create IRA violence. He personally authorized the killing of honest British agents that had infiltrated the IRA at lower ranks. During the war in Iraq, British agents were caught dressed in Arab garb in southern Iraq, trying to plant explosive charges within the city under coalition control. The British government refused to explain what they were doing, even as it demanded their release. Al-Qaeda is not what you think. It turns out to be a false flag terror organization financed out of Saudi Arabia and run at the top by persons like Osama bin Laden, who was a reported CIA covert asset. According to the whistleblowers, the CIA leased a C-130 Hercules cargo plane to deliver shoulder-fire anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to the IRA. All of the 2010 terrorist convictions of young Muslims in the U.S. were done by the FBI agent provocateurs who incited disgruntled young immigrants and provided them with know-how and fake explosives to justify their prosecution. It is clear that none of these ignorant Muslims would have been able to engage in terror without government provocation and guidance. Here's some more recent example. The Belfast Telegraph revealed in November 2010 that then addressing his peers in the House of Lords, Lord James of Blackheath revealed that he had been involved in the laundering of billions of pounds of terrorist money, specifically that of the IRA and various North African terrorists at the behest of the Bank of England. We're gonna skip the rest of that. Like I said, guys, I'm gonna try to move quick. There's a lot to read here. And if you guys wanna know more about it, let me know in the comments and I will go back to those. We'll do another video and I'll do it all. What about nuclear terrorism? Both US and Russia have built nuclear suitcase bombs powerful enough to destroy a 1-mile area of an American city. But the claim that as many as 10 of these have been lost or allowed to pass into the hands of Middle Eastern terrorist organizations is unlikely, for just meant to put blame on Iran for more fear. These weapons are some of the most closely guarded assets ever, implanting this story, government propagandists are taking advantage of the public's naive belief in the fall of the Soviet Union and a discrete security structure around their nuclear weapons. Nonsense. We have found no credible information that this is true. The only known loss of nuclear material was done on purpose by German intelligence in a supposed sting operation against terrorists. In fact, the terrorists were trumped up too, so was just a publicity stunt to encourage more aid to the Russians to secure their nuclear stockpile. Even if Suitcase Nuke were lost a few years ago, as claimed, it wouldn't work now. The nuclear titanium triggers in these devices have to be renewed very often, rendering them useless to a terrorist if not used soon after they get them. Okay, let's turn the page here. U.S. Strategic Nuclear Forces. In order to understand where the U.S. will be hit, here is a brief overview of U.S. nuclear and strategic forces and their support systems that we consider likely primary or secondary targets in a nuclear war. All this information is available publicly through a variety of sources. Most of our information came from the U.S. military's website, www.globalsecurity.org, and the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, www.thebulletin.org. I believe this is the map they are referring to. As you can see, California and Nevada have some high targets. The same with Ohio. Almost one for every state. Almost, not all. East Coast, pretty much all along the East Coast. California, somewhere Midland, United States. Canada, into Canada. But these are a lot right there. ICBM. These are one of the core of nuclear deterrence strategy, but the U.S. continues to disarm while the Russians only pretend. The U.S. has deactivated the 50 Peacekeeper missiles, the most powerful and versatile U.S. land-based missile, and the components are stored near Hill Air Force Base in Utah, making that base and the nearby Dugway Proving Ground a prime nuclear target. The U.S. is now relying solely on the Minuteman III missile, whose warheads have been reduced from 3 down to 1, and those warheads lack the power and penetrate many of the Russian hardened silos. Alright, Canadian nuclear forces. Canada has a very limited tactical offensive capability, and it has no strategic weapons, no missiles, and no long-range bombers, and therefore no nuclear weapons delivery capability of its forces. Its forces have been traditionally linked with the U.S. military in defending the North American northern sector. The DEW line is still a place along Canada's far northern boundary. It has 11 manned long-range radars for detecting incoming aircraft and missiles, 36 unmanned gap filler radars, and 4 manually manned coastal radar sites, 1 on the Pacific and 3 on the Atlantic. Alright. Fallout. We have eliminated a fallout map in this edition because there is no accurate way to show predictable fallout directions. This is because fallout will be affected partially by surface winds and particularly by high altitude jet stream winds. Surface winds change often. High altitude winds at the jet stream level undulate over the US and Canada in a wave form, generally from west to east due to the rotation of the Earth.
After a nuclear event, the top portion of the mushroom cloud will reach jet stream heights and scatter radioactive material in a broadening plumb to the east, northeast, or southeast. EMP, electrical magic pulse. During testing of nuclear weapons after World War II, it was discovered that upper atmosphere nuclear explosions interacted with the Earth's magnetic field, creating an electric storm of electromagnetic waves that can cover the entire nation depending on the altitude and size of the explosion. Russian and Chinese nuclear attack doctrines call for an early use of high-altitude nuclear explosions to cause large electromagnetic pulses to radiate down onto the Earth's surface. These pulses cause extremely high voltages to be generated in every form of electrical wiring, especially along power lines. This attack would knock out our radar sites and communication equipment. Since the nation at large would be targeted, an EMP may give you several minutes warning about a nuclear attack if you are watching for it. The resilient power surges occur faster than lightning strikes and could blow out transformers and power plants, lightning protectors, everything connected to the grid, or a long piece of metal will conduct some of this electrical wave. Light bulbs, computers, and almost everything that is plugged in at your home or business could be burned out. It is even possible to damage equipment that is not turned on or plugged in if there is significant wire within the equipment that can flow through computer circuits. A total cessation of electricity, radio, and television may alert you to this impending disaster. If that happens, you can assume a nuclear blast is imminent in the target areas outlined above within 10 to 30 minutes. An EMP attack from a single warhead launched by a terrorist group or rogue nation, unlikely to be devastating. It would take 6 or more EMP bursts distributed over the US for the full effect, and only Russia and China have that capability. They won't strike until they can also stop our EMP-hardened military from retaliating. Fundamentals for surviving a nuclear blast. Outside the 5-mile destructive radius of a nuclear weapon, you can survive the shock, waves, and flying debris by getting into a basement space and crouching down near the walls closest to the target area. For example, if you are in San Diego, get up against a basement wall which is closest to the naval bases and facilities. Blast waves will break your windows, but the house will likely stand if more than 5 to 10 miles away. Getting out of town alive with massive amounts of fallout raining down will be another problem, if not impossible. Remember, only particles caught up in the mushroom cloud of a blast become radioactive. The radioactivity of those particles doesn't make anything else radioactive. They just radiate their energy until it naturally dissipates. Most radioactivity will decay in a week or two. This isn't like a meltdown of a nuclear reactor, which can spew heavy isotope radiation for months and have deadly effects for years. If you are not living in the blast zone, but are potentially downwind of one, make a quick calculation of the present wind and how long before the fallout arrives. Make every attempt to travel away from the blast and get to a fallout shelter or at least a basement space at home, or perhaps even at your office. If you have the capability and foresight, you need to have enough shelter and supplies to last you at least 2 weeks and perhaps a few months if there are numerous strikes thereafter. Forewarning. Advance warning can make all the difference. Joel puts out a weekly newsletter entitled The World Affairs Brief, which is not only which not only covers his analysis of world news each week, but will provide advance warning of dangerous future events. It is very inexpensive and comes to your email box every week. Go to www.worldaffairsbriefs.com for more information. Alright. Shelter considerations. If you absolutely have to live in a blast zone, you must build an underground blast shelter. With very expensive components such as blast doors, high-tech ventilation systems, and blast valves. Even after this expense, the chances are slim you will have significant warning to be able to take shelter there when the strike comes. If you must live in a high-threat blast area, you should at least locate your residence so there is a substantial hill between you and the target area, so that your home will be somewhat shielded from the pressure wave. Remember, however, that many of the explosions will be in the air, not ground bursts. If you take our advice, after all, that's what the book is for, and relocate away from blast areas, then all that has to be dealt with is fallout. It takes much less money to prepare against fallout, and because this threat is likely to spread out and cover most of North America, we recommend this precaution for everyone. Biological and chemical war. Despite the claims that everyone has eliminated chemical and biological weapons, we don't trust the Russian self-reports about their disarmament. Moreover, the Chinese have never even made any promises to disarm. Prudence would dictate that we should be prepared for widespread use of biological and chemical weapons. Russia has the most extensive arsenal in the world. We expect that Russia will rely on its nuclear arsenal in the beginning, but will use chemical and biological weapons extensively if any Western armies try to combat Russia in a conventional field of battle. Chemical and biological weapons are some of the easiest weapons to manufacture and deliver compared to the devastation they wreak. Even small nations like Iran and North Korea are working to increase stockpiles so as to even the playing field with the US. None of these countries have any regard for the potential retaliation on their own people. In fact, it is highly probable that the insensitivities of Western countries would not allow them to use such weapons, even if our own soldiers were attacked with them. Morally, we support this position of not attacking armies with weapons of mass destruction, but we do support attacking the leaders of aggressive foreign nations. Why spend time killing the rather innocent foot soldiers when it is the leaders who are the ones responsible for sending them into battle? Okay. Invasion. It is our considered opinion that the Russians and Chinese will not try to occupy America after the strike, since that would involve millions of troops and extended supply lines that could not be maintained. Moreover, the millions of gun owners in America would quickly form into a formidable guerrilla force. Even unorganized, millions of armed citizens can play havoc with an occupation. We believe the Russians simply want us out of the picture so they can blackmail the rest of the world into submission. However, it is entirely probable that there will be a massive invasion of humanity from Mexico after the radiation danger has passed. Law enforcement will be too preoccupied with their own survival and that of their families to worry about waves of illegal immigrants. We don't recommend living near the southern U.S. border. Social unrest. Much of the threats of social unrest in other countries is related to labor disputes, racial tensions, student demonstrations, riots, and uprisings. The population in the U.S. is less affected by the same factors such as socialist laws, labor unions, and welfare groups, although These factors are growing in the U.S. currently. Mob actions in the U.S. have only occurred in large metro areas with concentrations of low-class minorities and whites that can be induced into mob violence when some injustice, real or perceived, triggers an excuse. We have noticed a criminal aspect to riots in large U.S. cities when police do not stop looting. We have noticed a criminal aspect to riots in large cities when police do not stop looting. The unorganized criminal world learned a dangerous lesson from the first of the LA riots. They learned that police were intimidated and would not stop them from looting. As long as the pillaging was done in significant numbers, the masses of the people who join riots when it involves looting, as opposed to peaceful demonstrations, prove there is an undercurrent of personal corruption within American society. It shows that some people harbor wantonly resentful and greedy habits that allow them to overcome their conscience and steal if they can hide in a crowd. We believe this is reinforced and justified in their minds when they receive government-mandated social benefits because of their needs. During the looting in the LA riots, the police were unwilling to take assertive or physical crowd control actions to protect private property, which would likely have kept the demonstrations shorter. These isolated incidents of social unrest, however, are not the key threat we think you should plan around. They are very small compared to the nationwide social upheaval following an EMP strike and nuclear attack. Lessons from history. We get some idea of the dangers from social unrest by examining the cases in history where large portions of the population have been affected by major catastrophes. Before and after major hurricanes or storm, principal roads, highways, and freeways have been clobbered with traffic from people trying to leave big cities. Cars have run out of gas, sitting in endless lines going nowhere. In most urban freeways, there are barriers on either side of the road that keep cars from getting off except at exits. In an emergency, don't get on the freeway unless it doesn't have side barriers, even if traffic seems to be moving. In the days after Hurricane Katrina, there was widespread looting and social unrest. Police and National Guard personnel had to be pulled away from rescue efforts to contain violence, shootings, and arson, but largely allowed looting to continue. Mob looting and social unrest is a big potential problem anywhere there are high-density populations containing ghetto-type areas when times get hard. However, the number of people participating seems to increase with the scale of the emergency. During the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, even some of the locals who were part of the police force and in uniform were found looting. During World War II, systematic looting of houses took place as soldiers and refugees looked for food or valuables. Desperate for food, gardens were picked clean, houses emptied of goods, and every kind of animal was killed and eaten. At times, whole cities would evacuate to escape the approaching armies. In these cases, refugees choked roads, bridges, and mountain passes, making them virtually impassable unless people had alternate means available to them. Avoiding social unrest. By its nature, the great threat of social unrest is directly proportional to the density of the population around you. Relatively uninhabited zones around big cities are also at risk. In Section 3, we discuss how to locate a retreat in a safe area away from these high-density threats. But even after choosing a good retreat site and building up your supplies, it is likely this threat will still reach you in some significant way. We will also talk about keeping a recommended low profile with your preparation. We don't recommend making your home look like a fortress. In fact, we recommend you protect your goods first by concealment and as a last resort with arms. One of the hardest things you must think through beforehand is what you will do when confronted with masses of people needing help. Widespread social unrest will always accompany war, just as it did at the end of World War II. Particularly after nuclear war, there will be so many sick and dying that it will almost fertile to try to be a good Samaritan for those badly irritated. Everyone will have to make some really tough decisions. Prepare backup plans for yourself along every step of your planned emergency escape route. If you don't use all your preparations, you can refer others to them. Your basement stores in your suburb residence and share. Above all, you don't do yourself any good by giving everything away trying to help people who haven't prepared. It only takes a few minutes of unlimited giving before you are all starving. Every person has got to be trained to fend for themselves and seek shelter on their own. Make sure your family members know how to get to shelter you have prepared. In the entire course of human history, there are few circumstances of events of any major significance, war, assassinations, major changes in control of people's destiny that have not been accomplished through the combined efforts of conspiring men. As one historian put out, no one knows history unless they know the history of conspiracy. Although many conspiracies are small in a scale and isolated, we see a single or broad conspiracy with a common thread weaving down through the centuries. All right. And so next chapter, chapter 11, government intuition on liberty and individual lives, strategic relocation.
Geez, that was a lot of reading, guys. And I know educational information can be very boring at times, but that was some key information that may be able to help you understand a little more, and also how to prepare more into the future coming. As you know, Australia has pretty much fallen. France is pretty much fallen. Canada's gone. It's not going to be long before the United States is looking like the rest of the world. So we need good people like yourselves who tune into this broadcast to start standing up, start saying no, and don't let security dictate your lives. You know, whoever says that, whoever gives up their freedom for security will have neither, and we all know who said that. So I salute you all who stand up to tyranny. Next chapter, we're going to go over the government intuition on liberty and individual lives, conspiracy to control government, and much more. Now, I didn't cover everything in that chapter we just talked about, however, because there's a lot to read. However, in the comments below, if you'd like to know more about a section or what have you, let me know in the comments section, and I can do my best to do a short video clip and post that to YouTube, and you can watch it there. Now, with everything that's going on in the world, the time is now to get educated. The time is now to get your information together. The time is now to stock up on storable food and storable water, and do it now, because in the future you might not have that chance, and you'll be kicking yourself in the butt. And I know I'm getting prepared and I'm getting ready. and I have many bug out plans, and you should too, no matter where you're located in the world. We went over Canada and the United States today. In future episodes, we'll be able to talk more about, Europe and, the Asia area, the Russian area, just, Latin America, Australia, different parts of the globe. Primarily, we talked more about America and Canada in this video. Anyway, appreciate y'all tuning in. Salute anyone who stands in the face of tyranny. Your boy, the Alan Report, signing off. Until next time, ciao.